She lives in glass towers. He rebuilds broken lives in a garage. When her bosses target him, her next choice changes everything. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. Scarlett Hayes had learned to walk into rooms like she owned them. Even on nights she felt like she was held together with coffee and willpower. Back straight, chin up, smile sharp. Her body refused to shrink the way stylists hinted it should, so she'd stopped apologizing for it. Tonight her thick, curvy frame filled a slate-grey dress that hugged her hips and soft waist without mercy, silk blouse framing the deep line of her cleavage. Platinum blonde waves fell over one shoulder, red lipstick flawless, heels viciously high. People underestimated curves. She'd turned hers into armor. The mirrored elevator in Stanton Tower carried her to the 32nd floor and the biggest pitch of her career. She watched her reflection ride with her, watched the tiredness fade from her eyes as she layered on the version of herself the world wanted. Scarlett, senior brand strategist. The woman who made billion-dollar hotels look like they'd always known who they were. "You're basically on time," Mila hissed as the doors opened, "and you look like heartbreak. The VP won't stand a chance." "Let's hope what hits him is the deck, not my chest," Scarlett muttered, adjusting the narrow belt at her waist. "This is it," Mila said under her breath as they walked. "You land this rebrand. They can't pretend you're not partner material." Partner. The word hummed in Scarlett's chest. A permanent seat in this glass and steel world. Proof she belonged here, not just visiting from the wrong side of some invisible line. The pitch itself felt like stepping onto a stage she knew by heart. Once she started speaking, everything else blurred at the edges. Scarlett moved at the head of the table, slides washing the room in soft light as she walked the hotel chain through their new story. Less stiff luxury, more lived-in warmth. Less marble museum, more place where people could actually breathe. She watched the VP's posture change as she talked. Watched his eyes sharpen when she tied emotion to numbers, sentiment to spend. The room laughed where it should, went quiet when she showed them how much they were bleeding without even noticing. Her voice never shook, her dress never slipped, her heart rattled against her ribs the entire time. When it ended, the VP stood and took her hand in both of his. "We'll be in touch," he said with a small smile that sounded a lot like, "Start planning." Her boss clapped her shoulder hard enough to make her teeth knock. "You nailed it, Hayes. Go home, drink something expensive. Tomorrow we start building the monster you just sold." Applause, backpats, jokes about her, killing it as usual, followed her down the hallway. By the time she reached the elevator again, the adrenaline was fading, leaving her strangely hollow. Another mountain climbed. Another promise that the next title, the next client, would finally make the world feel less fragile and glassy. The parking garage was cool and echoing, the city's neon smeared through gaps in the concrete like distant fire. Scarlett crossed to her car, every step a reminder of how much her feet hated these heels. She slid into the driver's seat, dress stretching over her thighs, portfolio dropped on the passenger side. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked glossy and composed, a woman who had it all under control. "You did it," she told herself quietly. Again. She turned the key. The engine coughed, shuddered, and died. Every warning light on the dash lit up in a sick little chorus. She tried again. Nothing. A third time, more out of stubbornness than hope. Silence. "You have got to be kidding me," she breathed. A car eased past, and the driver gestured in that universal way that said, "You're in my way." Heat rose under her skin. She flicked her hazard lights on and climbed out, the air cool against her bare calves. She popped the hood and stared into the mass of metal and cables like they might rearrange themselves out of guilt. Roadside assistants put her on hold to the sound of cheerful music that made her want to scream. Her ex didn't answer. Mila sent a string of champagne emojis. Scarlett stood there in her expensive dress, alone in a concrete box with a dead car and a phone full of people who couldn't actually help, and felt something sharp twist under her ribs. "Rough night for your ride to give up on you." The voice came from behind her. Low, smooth, wrapped in something like amusement but not unkind. Scarlett spun, fingers tightening around her keys, heart jumping into her throat. A man stepped from between two parked cars into the yellow pool of light above her hood. He didn't look like anyone from the 32nd floor. Tall, broad-shouldered, deep brown skin catching the harsh light. Dark curls cut close. A black t-shirt clung to a solid chest, jeans worn soft at the knees, boots scuffed. Grease marked one forearm, and a thin pale scar cut across his knuckle. His hands, big, work-strong, hung loose and open at his sides, palms visible, like he understood exactly how he might look to a woman alone at night. "I'm fine," Scarlett said automatically, though her pulse was racing. "My car just decided it's done with me." His gaze flicked from her face to the engine, then briefly over the curve of her dress and the ridiculous height of her heels. No smirk, no slow, hungry once over. Just a quick assessment, like she was Data and he was used to fixing broken things. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked. "Or I can help you push it into a proper spot so people stop trying to run you over. You're cool." Every warning her mother had ever given her screamed in her head. He must have read it in her shoulders, because he took a small step back, hands lifting slightly. "Not trying to be creepy," he said calmly. "My truck's over there." He nodded toward an old midnight blue pickup with its hood up and a neat line of tools on a rag. "I work on engines." Yours just yelled loud enough that I felt rude ignoring it. "You're a mechanic?" she asked, still weighing the distance between them. "Among other things." A half smile tugged at his mouth. "I run a community garage a few blocks away. Kids, single moms, whoever wanders in with a strange noise and a prayer. I was dropping off one of my teens. He doesn't do elevators. I'm Dante." A community garage. Teens. The words belonged to a different world than hers. "Scarlett," she said. He nodded once, like her name registered, and he'd tuck it somewhere safe. "Okay, Scarlett with the offended car. I can probably get it to forgive you for one more trip. But if you'd rather wait for a tow, I'll mind my business." She hesitated. His posture stayed relaxed, steady, no moving closer, no pressure, just an offer. Something in her, maybe the part that used to ask for help before life taught her not to, exhaled. "Please," she said, "if you can." He stepped forward, still keeping a respectful distance, and leaned under the hood. Up close she caught his scent. Clean soap, a faint trace of sweat, motor oil. His forearms flexed as he checked cables and connections. A small tattoo vanished beneath his sleeve when he lifted his arm. "Try it now," he called. She slid into the seat, heart thudding, and turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed like it wanted to be difficult, then roared to life. Relief spilled out of her in a shaky laugh. "You're a miracle worker." "Just repetition," he said, lowering the hood. "Battery's on its last legs. Alternator might be sulking too. Get it checked before it strands you somewhere worse." "Like here?" she asked, still breathless. "Garages are safe," he said simply. "I meant somewhere no one's listening." He wiped his hands on a rag, then pulled a small white card from his pocket and held it out to her. The logo was simple, printed in deep blue. "Rebuild Community Garage and Makerspace. Dante Cole, Director." She arched a brow despite herself. "Director? Fancy." He huffed a soft laugh. "Fancy word for guy who fixes things and yells at teenagers about safety goggles. 12th and Marrow. First time you come in, I only judge your taste in music." "I usually go to dealerships," she blurted, then winced at how it sounded. "Yeah," he said, not offended at all. "You look like you pay for espresso and warranties, not chipped mugs and favours. No shame in that." His gaze softened. "But if your world ever feels too high up, we're down at street level. No dress code, no slideshows, just people trying to make broken stuff work again." Her world flashed in her mind. Glass walls, curated feeds, champagne toasts. His words landed like a door cracked open somewhere else, where things were messy and loud and real. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for this, for stopping." "Couldn't pretend I didn't hear it," he said. "The car, I mean." His mouth curved. "Drive safe, Scarlett." He stepped back as she closed the door, giving her back the space he'd borrowed. As she pulled away, she saw him in the rear-view mirror, turning toward his battered truck, shoulders easy, moving like someone who belonged exactly where he was. Hours later, in her spotless apartment high above the city, her phone buzzed non-stop with congratulations and glittering emojis. Scarlett lay on her back, dress unzipped, eyeliner smudged, and turned Dante's card over and over between her fingers. Rebuild. She told herself she was only keeping it in case her car died again. She didn't admit, to anyone, least of all herself, that for the first time in a very long time she'd met a man who didn't fit her polished world at all, and that something deep inside her had leaned toward him anyway. Scarlett lasted 6 days. 6 days of back-to-back meetings, a flood of emails, and a calendar that looked like a losing game of Tetris. 6 days of people saying, "You crushed it," about the hotel pitch, while quietly loading more weight onto her already overloaded shoulders. "You're the face of this rebrand now," her boss said, smiling like it was a compliment. "This is what you wanted, right?" Scarlett smiled back, because that was what was expected. Of course it was what she wanted. Partner track, respect, money, proof. But every night when she stripped off her dress and slid out of her heels, she felt less like a woman building a life and more like a building herself, all glass and pressure and no solid ground. On the 6th night, a client cancelled last minute. It should have been a gift. 3 free hours, a rare gap. Instead, her boss simply leaned in her doorway. "Great, that gives you time to redo the mood boards now that marketing shifted the demographic," he said. "You're amazing at working under pressure, Hayes. Don't lose that edge." He walked away, leaving her with flickering fluorescent lights and a headache burrowing into the back of her skull. She stared at her screen, at the hotel's smiling stock photo families, at rooms designed to look like home for people who never really stayed anywhere long enough to build one. Her hand drifted to her bag and closed around something small and stiff. Rebuild. Community garage and makerspace. Dante Cole, director. Scarlett turned the card over in her fingers, pulse tapping at her throat. She imagined putting it back, going home, pouring a drink, sleeping badly, waking up to do it all again. Instead, she found herself standing, grabbing her coat and walking out before she could talk herself into staying. "Taking off," Mila called after her. "Client research," Scarlett said, which wasn't technically a lie. "I'll call you." The city shifted around her as she drove. Glass towers loosened their grip on the sky, shrinking into brick buildings with fading paint. Smooth sidewalks turned cracked and uneven. Neon signs gave way to hand-lettered windows and murals blooming across warehouse walls. By the time she turned onto Marrow Street, her car felt like an imposter. Rebuild sat on the corner like it'd grown there. Deep blue paint, a bright yellow mural of hands cupping an engine that morphed into a skyline. The bay doors were rolled up, spilling light and noise onto the street. Scarlett parked half a block away and sat with her hands on the steering wheel, dressed tight over her thighs, heart pounding like she was about to do something illicit. "This is stupid," she told herself. "You don't belong here." That thought landed with a familiar sting. It sounded too much like the voice in her head when she was 16, walking into her first city party in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit. She'd spent a decade proving that voice wrong. Maybe it was time to stop letting it dictate where she went. Scarlett stepped out of the car. The air smelled different here. Oil and metal and something savoury from a food truck around the corner. Her heels clicked on the pavement as she walked toward the open bay. Inside, the space was alive. On one side, 2 cars sat on lifts, their undersides exposed. A man in coveralls rolled out from under a sedan, laughing at something a teenage boy said. Music played from a speaker, some old soul track, warm and slow. On the other side, long tables held scattered tools, cardboard prototypes, laptops, and half-finished robots made from recycled parts. A girl in an oversized hoodie soldered something while another kid narrated dramatically into his phone, filming her. In the center of it all, Dante stood by a whiteboard, marker in hand, explaining something to a cluster of teenagers. His hoodie sleeves were shoved up, revealing those same strong forearms, a thin smear of grease at his wrist. "The thing about fixing anything," he was saying, "is you have to figure out what it's really doing. Not what you hoped it would do, not what it promised on the box, what it's actually doing in front of you. Once you're honest about that, then you can start changing it." One of the kids, maybe 16, skinny, locks pulled back, raised a hand. "So what if what it's doing sucks? Then you decide if it's worth rebuilding or if you turn it into parts for something better," Dante said. "Machines, habits, whole damn systems. Same rules." A little girl, maybe 8, clung to his leg, peeking around it like he was a tree. She wore a pink dress with oil smears on it and glitter sneakers. Dante adjusted his stance without missing a beat, letting her hide behind him. Scarlett's throat tightened. This was not a glossy mentoring program for a brand brochure. No carefully posed shots, no slogans, just life, messy and vivid, humming around him. He saw her then. His gaze flicked toward the doorway, and for a second, surprise broke his easy focus. His eyes tracked over her, the tailored coat, the deep burgundy dress hugging her curves, the heels that didn't belong in this space. And something like a smile tugged at his mouth. He murmured something to the cluster of kids, handed the marker to the girl beside him, and walked towards Scarlett, wiping his hands on a rag that probably shouldn't have qualified as clean. "You found the low-altitude side of town," he said when he was close enough, voice warm. "And you even managed to park without getting robbed. I'm impressed." "I drove past 3 times first," last she admitted, because lying felt pointless when surrounded by kids building robots out of scrap. "Your mural was judging me." "Good," he said. "Means it's working." His gaze softened. "You okay?" No one at work asked that like they actually wanted an answer. They said it on autopilot, ready with a joke or a pivot back to business. Dante asked it like he'd noticed something, like the tension in her shoulders had volume. "I had a window," she said. "Thought I'd get my battery looked at." He glanced past her at the car. "You also could have gone to a dealership with espresso and chrome stools." "I decided to downgrade to chipped mugs and teenagers," she said. "Thought I might build character." That slow grin spread across his face, doing something uncomfortable to her lungs. "We're full service like that. Come on." He led her in, matching his pace to her heels without a word. The kids glanced up, curiosity blatant, but no one stared like she was some exotic animal. A small boy with big glasses ran past them, nearly colliding with Scarlett's hip. Dante scooped him by the back of his hoodie with one hand, redirecting him like it was the easiest thing in the world. "Slow down, Rocket," he said. "We only have one Scarlett tonight. We're not getting a replacement if you dent this one." The boy giggled and shot her a shy smile before tearing off again, slightly slower. "You told them my name?" she asked, startled. "You told me your name," he said simply. "I remember things." Heat crawled up her neck. The last man who'd remembered details about her had weaponized them. Dante popped her hood and checked the battery, moving with efficient familiarity. "You drove here on that?" he muttered. "You like living on the edge." "I like my car starting when I turn the key," she said defensively. "You like not stopping long enough to notice the warning lights," he corrected mildly. "Hold this." He placed a small flashlight in her hand and positioned her closer, guiding her wrist with a light touch so the beam hit the right spot. His fingers were warm, calloused. The contact sent a ridiculous shiver through her. "Relax," he murmured, eyes on the engine. "I'm not going to break your arm, or your dress." "Good," she said, trying not to think about what it would feel like if those hands were on softer parts of her. "This dress cost more than my first car." "Looks better built," he said absently, then seemed to realize what he'd said and huffed a soft laugh. "The dress, I mean, and the car, probably." "Sure," she said, lips curving. "Cover your tracks." He swapped the battery with one from a shelf stacked with labelled parts. When he straightened, he wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a faint smudge. "Try now," he said. She slid into the seat, turned the key. The engine purred like a satisfied cat. "You keep doing that," she called out the open door. "People are going to start calling you for miracles." "I prefer competent," he replied, leaning down to meet her gaze. "Miracles imply it's out of my hands. Most things aren't." Something in her chest snagged on that. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. He shrugged. "Call it a first-time consult. You can pay me by not ignoring the next weird noise your life makes." "That's not how invoices work," she said, stepping out again. "You have rent to pay, kids to supply with safety goggles, apparently. And you have a company that bills people $2,000 to tell them their logo doesn't match their soul," he said. "We all hustle somehow." "How do you know what my company does?" she asked, startled. He tilted his head. "I Googled you." Her heart stuttered. "You what?" "You gave me your name and drove off in a car that was threatening to die," he said. "I wanted to make sure you got home. Turns out you're internet famous enough that if you'd crashed, Twitter would have told me." She swallowed. The idea of this man scrolling through her polished headshots, campaign articles, red carpet photos from corporate galas, it made her feel exposed in a way that standing here in a tight dress never had. "And," she managed, "and you smile different in person," he said quietly, "less rehearsed." Her breath caught. A teenager called from across the room, "Dante!" The printers jammed again. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at Scarlett. "You want to see the chaos, or you need to run back to the Glass Kingdom." She should go. She had emails, slides, 1,000 invisible strings tying her back to her tower. Instead, she asked, "What happens here?" "We try to teach people they're allowed to touch their own lives," he said. "Engines, art, code, whatever. Systems are designed to make certain people feel like everything is too complicated to fix without paying someone who already has everything. We're bad for that business model." It was the kind of sentence that would have sounded pretentious, coming from a man in a tailored suit at a networking event. From him, surrounded by grease and kids and half-built machines, it sounded like truth. "Show me," she said before she could talk herself out of it. He smiled, a real one this time, bright and unguarded. "Careful, Scarlett," he said. "You hang out here too long. Your world might start looking different." As he led her deeper into the garage, past humming printers and laughing kids and walls covered in sketches and plans, she realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. It already did. Scarlett started living a double life. By day, she was still the woman in the slate-grey dress striding through glass hallways, her curves wrapped in expensive fabric, her calendar stacked with client calls and quick check-ins that were never quick. She sat in conference rooms surrounded by renderings of the hotel chain's future, sleek lobbies, curated authentic experiences, designed to make wealthy guests feel brave but safe. By night, she drove down to Marrow Street, traded her heels for sneakers she kept in the trunk, and stepped into the noisy, warm chaos of rebuild. Here, no one cared about her title. The kids called her Scar or Miss Scarlett, depending on their mood. She learned how to unclog a 3D printer, hold a flashlight without shaking, and read the subtle tilt of Dante's mouth when he was amused and trying not to show it. They hadn't defined what they were to each other. There was just an ease that grew between them, stitched out of shared jokes and long looks and long nights. One evening she arrived to find Rebuild half-lit, the big bay doors only half open. Inside, Dante stood alone at a workbench, sleeves pushed up, head bent over a disassembled engine. Music hummed low from an old speaker. No kids, no chatter. "You close early?" she asked, leaning against the doorway. He looked up, mouth curving. "We had a field trip to the Science Museum. I got outvoted on staying open late. You're here on your own time, Hayes. You know that, right?" She stepped in, pulling her coat tighter around her dress. "I like the noise, but I kind of like this too." He watched her, eyes lingering on the curve of her hip, the shape of her body under the dress she'd chosen for a client dinner she'd skipped. His gaze wasn't polite or dismissive. It was hungry and careful at the same time, like he was bracing himself not to reach for something he wanted. "What happened to the dinner?" he asked. "Got cancelled," she said, then sighed. "Again, they moved it to next week. Again, it's like my time is a suggestion." "Your time's the only thing that's actually yours," he murmured. "Careful who you let write on it." She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "About them, the hotel people. They want to do a community spotlight as part of the rebrand, something that makes them look grounded, socially conscious, less like a soulless giant and more like a partner in revitalization." His brows rose. "That's a lot of words to say they need a photo op." "I know," she said quickly, "but this could be good. They have a community fund they barely use. I could push them to put real money into something that deserves it. Equipment, scholarships, rent, places like this." She watched his face carefully. "I thought maybe they could sponsor Rebuild. We shoot here. Tell your story. Tie it to their new belonging campaign." Dante leaned back against the workbench, folding his arms. "Scarlett," he said slowly, "do you want money for this place? Or do your bosses want a place that looks gritty but cute in their brochure?" "Both," she admitted. "I won't lie to you, but I can control some of it. I can draw lines. No kids' faces if you don't want. No fake narratives. Just what it really is, and in return, you get leverage. Funding. Visibility that's not just me and my Instagram." He was quiet for a long beat, then sighed. I've had cameras here before. Local news, politicians campaigning, activists with GoPros. Everybody wants footage of the good program that proves they care. Then they go home and we're still patching leaks in the roof with buckets. I'm not them, she said softly. He studied her and she let him, resisting the urge to straighten her dress or fix her hair. No, he said finally, you're not. He scrubbed a hand over his jaw. Here's the deal. You bring them. We listen. But if anyone talks about my kids like they're props or talks about cleaning up this neighborhood like we're trash, the deal's off. And I need it in writing that any money goes to actual programming and repairs, not some Dante smiles in a brochure project. I can do that, she said, hope sparking. I'll draft it myself. He arched a brow. And what do you get, Miss Partner Track? She swallowed. A chance to use my job for something that doesn't make me feel hollow. He pushed off the bench and closed the distance between them, stopping with a breath of space left. His hand hovered near her waist, fingers flexing, as if asking a question without words. This thing you're building, he said quietly, eyes on hers. Is it about your campaign? Or is it about you needing your world to change without admitting it terrifies you? Both, she whispered. His thumb brushed barely against the curve of her hip. Heat shot through her, startling in its clarity. Okay, he said, then we play it your way. But if they try to break what we're building here, I'm pulling the plug, even if it means you lose something up there. She thought of glass walls, of email chains, of the title hovering like a crown just out of reach. Then she thought of kids with soldering irons and a mural of hands rebuilding a city. If they make me choose between them and this place, she said, voice steadier than she felt, I already know what I'm choosing, even if the rest of me is catching up. Dante's eyes softened, something like pride flickering through them. That's the real rebuild, he murmured. He could have kissed her then. She could feel it in the charged air between them, in the way his gaze dropped to her mouth and back. Instead, he stepped back, giving her room to breathe. Tell your suits to come by Saturday, he said. We'll be ready. Saturday arrived with cold air and bright sunlight that made the mural look especially bold. Scarlett wore jeans and a fitted black sweater under her coat, curves still undeniable, hair in a loose knot. She'd spent half the night drafting agreements and pushing legal for language that actually meant something. She'd also spent half the night imagining every way this could go wrong. The hotel team arrived in a small convoy. Marketing people with laptops, a creative director in minimalist glasses, a VP in a wool coat that cost more than some of the cars in the lot. Scarlett walked them through the space, introducing Dante, explaining the programs. At first, it went well. The creative director loved the mural. The social media manager got teary hearing a girl talk about building her first robot. Scarlett watched Dante with the kids, solid and gentle, and felt something fierce twist in her chest. Then one of the executives said it. This is perfect, he told the VP, gesturing with his coffee cup. We get the before shot here, then we show the after. The new hotel, the cleaned-up street, all that. Real transformation. Investors eat that up. Scarlett's stomach dropped. What do you mean, cleaned up? She asked too sharply. The VP flipped his tablet toward her. On the screen was a rendering she hadn't seen. The new hotel tower, shining. The corner lot where Rebuild stood was blank. Green space, maybe. A logo. We're in talks to acquire the block, he said. It's early days, but it's in the long-term plan. Relax, we're years away, and we'd relocate any existing tenants with a generous package. We're not savages. Scarlett heard the words relocate and tenants like slaps. You didn't tell me that, she said, voice low. It wasn't finalized, he said with a shrug. Besides, you're the one who said this neighborhood was ripe for revitalization. Your words. Her throat closed. Those were her words. Slides she'd made, maps she'd color-coded, demographics she'd sliced until the story looked neat. Behind her, Dante's voice cut through the noise. That true? She turned. He stood a few paces away, kids instinctively clustering near him, eyes wide. Dante, she started. Is that what this is? He asked, gaze on her, dark and steady. You bring them here, show them the good little program, so they feel better about bulldozing us later? No, she said, stepping toward him. I didn't know about the block. I swear, I thought. Funding, support. I thought I could force them to show up for you. He looked past her at the executives, at the tablet, at the casual way they were already discussing angles and light. "I told you I've seen cameras before," he said quietly. "I just didn't think you'd be the one holding the door for them." His words landed like a physical blow. The kids watched, picking up tension even if they didn't understand the details. Scarlett's eyes burned. "I'm not on their side," she whispered. "Then stop standing with them," he said. A silence fell heavy and hard. The VP cleared his throat. "We don't need drama," he snapped. "Scarlett, if this location is going to be an issue—" "It is an issue," she said, turning, anger finally pushing through the shame. "You can't build a belonging campaign on top of displacing the people who actually belong here. We're offering them better facilities," he countered. "Safer spaces. You're too emotional about this." She laughed, a raw, disbelieving sound. "You hired me for my instincts about what's real. This is me telling you. If this is your story, it will blow up in your face the second anyone looks closely. You'll be the rich guys using brown kids as wallpaper before you tear their lives up." "Careful," he said softly. "Your future here depends on this account." Behind him, through the open bay door, Scarlett could see Rebuild's mural. Hands cradling an engine and a skyline, choosing to rebuild instead of erase. Something clicked into place. "Then maybe I need a different future," she said. On Monday, she walked into the boardroom with 2 decks. One was the polished presentation everyone expected, hotel as hero, neighborhood as emerging market, the quiet erasure of everything that didn't fit. The other was the deck she'd built in the dim hours after leaving Rebuild in silence. Raw photos, real quotes from kids and parents, a plan that centered partnership rather than conquest. It proposed funding makerspaces in every city the hotel operated in, dedicated floors for community events, contracts that protected existing residents. It was messy, ambitious, riskier. "This isn't what we agreed on," the VP said, flipping through it, frowning. "No," Scarlett said. "It's better. It actually matches the values you print on your lobby walls." Her boss shot her a warning look. "Scarlett, we're not activists. We're consultants." "I know," she said. "And as your consultant, I'm telling you, if you bulldoze a community space to build a lobby and call it progress, this entire campaign will be a lie. People feel lies. They don't stay in them. They don't post them with heart emojis. They drag you." Silence stretched. Pulse roaring in her ears, she pressed on. "You brought me in because I know how stories work," she said, voice steady. "The story where you throw Rebuild a check and then evict them in 5 years? That's not redefining luxury. That's just old money with new fonts. The story where you protect them, invest in them, and design your spaces around people instead of over them. That's something the world hasn't seen enough of." The VP looked at her like she was both a liability and a revelation. "And if we don't take your version," he asked. She swallowed. "Then you'll need someone else to sell yours." Her boss went pale. "Scarlett." "It's okay," she said quietly, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "If my world only works when I help erase places like Rebuild, I don't want it." She walked out of Stanton Tower with a box that held a plant, 2 framed photos, and Dante's card. She'd expected to feel like she was falling. Instead, it felt like taking off shoes that had been a size too small for years. It took her 3 days to work up the nerve to drive back to Marrow Street. Rebuild's door was propped open. Noise spilled out. Kids arguing, machines humming, music low and steady. She stepped inside, suddenly shy. Dante stood by the whiteboard, marker in hand. For a terrifying second, she thought he might ignore her. Then he set the marker down and walked over, wiping his hands on a cleaner rag than usual. "You disappeared," he said. "I quit," she replied. "Or they fired me." It was mutual yelling. One corner of his mouth twitched. "You went to war in a boardroom, didn't you?" "I tried," she said. "I don't know if it'll change anything. The VP took the deck. He said he'd consider the framing. I think that's corporate for, I might steal this and pretend it was my idea." "Welcome to my world," he said wryly. She took a breath. "I'm sorry, Dante, for bringing them here without knowing what they were planning, for handing them your address and calling it help." He studied her for a long moment. "You also stood up in front of them and called their plan what it was," he said slowly. "You walked away from the shiny world you built because it didn't match what you saw down here. That's not nothing." Her eyes stung. "I was so sure I could keep the 2 worlds separate. Use one to help the other without letting them touch. That's not how any of this works, is it? Systems don't stay in their boxes, he said gently. They bleed. The question is who you're willing to let get cut. A tear finally slipped free. She swiped at it, annoyed. Apparently I cry now. That's new. Could have fooled me, he murmured. You've been bleeding for years, Scar. You just finally decided to look at the wound. She laughed wetly. You're very poetic for a man who yells about talk specs. He smiled, then sobered. So what now? I don't know, she said, and it was terrifying and honest. I know I'm good at building stories and systems. I know I'm tired of building them for people who don't care, who gets crushed. I thought maybe I could help here. Grants, partnerships that don't suck. Strategy that keeps rebuilds safe instead of on someone's future demolition plan. He tilted his head. You're offering to redesign my world? No, she said. I'm asking if you'll let me help defend the one you already built, and maybe build something new together, something that's ours, not theirs. Silence hung between them, heavy with possibility. Then Dante stepped closer. This time he didn't hover. His hand slid to her waist, fingers curling into the curve there like they'd been waiting for permission. He was warm and solid, anchoring her in a way glass towers never had. You know I never wanted to drag you down here just to tear your world apart, he said quietly. I just wanted you to see that you were allowed to choose a different one. Her heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with the wild, dizzy feeling of standing on the edge of something real. I thought you didn't fit my world, she whispered. Turns out I didn't fit it either. I was just the last to admit it. His thumb brushed a slow, reverent arc along her side. So we build a new one where glass and concrete don't matter as much as who's inside, one where kids here grow up thinking the towers belong to them too. And us? She asked, voice small. And us, he said. We figure it out as we go, like any good rebuild. He cupped her face with his other hand, calloused thumb catching another tear, and bent his head. The kiss was not cinematic. It wasn't dipped or staged. It was slow and steady, his mouth learning hers, her body pressing against him, curves fitting into strength like two parts of a machine finally aligned. It tasted like motor oil in the air and salt on her lips, and the terrifying sweetness of choosing herself. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I don't have a 5-year plan anymore, she murmured. Good, he said, his hand tracing circles at the small of her back. Plans are overrated. We'll keep what's worth keeping and tear down what isn't. That's the work, right? She looked around at the chaos of rebuild, the kids, the tools, the mural of hands holding up a city, and realized her world had already changed. He hadn't fit it. He'd taught her she didn't have to fit it either. Together, they'd build something better.